This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal.
In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade.
It looks like one of those scenes of an old building being purposely dynamited and blown.
When we are successful,
I'm just a patsy,
and we will be.
We're ready to come to the microphone, so we'll listen up.
A new world order.
So my name's Robbie Parker.
It might have appeared that way, but from my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m.
Live from the Media Broadcasting Center.
Jim, you good?
This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal, where I'm very pleased to have an exceptional guest who has done extensive study of the Texas School Book Depository. Larry Revere has been working with him, and therefore I'm going to invite Larry to introduce him. Larry.
Thank you, Jim. Tonight we have our very, very special guest, William Weston. Bill has done extensive work on the JFK assassination, specializing in the Texas School Book Depository. But briefly, Bill's bibliography is very extensive, and he has covered a lot of material for many, many years, starting in the early 90s, going back to the 3rd decade with Jerry Rose, and on to the 4th decade, and with articles in JFK Politics and the Dealey Plaza Echo. So I would like us to please welcome our very, very special guest tonight, Bill Weston. Bill, welcome to The Real Deal.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Bill, I just wanted to I'm sorry, go ahead, Bill.
No, you go ahead first.
Yeah, okay. Well, I just wanted to give our audience a brief introduction on the TSBD and some of the outstanding work that you have done. And this comes from actually one of your very first articles, and called "The Transplantation of the TSBD," the Texas School Book Depository Building. And if I may, I'm just going to read this verbatim. Okay. Not much is known
Sure.
Not much is known about this company or the people who worked for it. Yet, from the little information that can be gathered, I believe the direction of the evidence points only one way, that there was a conspiracy to assassinate the president, and that the organizers of the plot had complete control of the book depository building. Every scrap of information, no matter how seemingly trivial, becomes potentially important in establishing how the company was linked to the conspiracy. Wow. I think that's an incredible statement, Bill, if you want to take it from there.
Okay. Yes, well, let's talk about what the Texas School Book Depository is, and particularly the building 411 Elm Street. In the first slide that you see there is the Texas School Book Depository, and Lee Harvey Oswald supposedly fired his shots from the 6th floor window, the southwest one that's on the far right. This building was built back in 1901, and it was first occupied by the Southern Rock Island Plow Company. David Harold Byrd bought the building in the 1930s, and we're going to be talking more about him in a while here. But he bought the building because he wanted to start an air conditioning assembly plant at this place. And part of his he invested with his cousin, Admiral Richard Byrd. So, but it never really got off the ground. And then it was occupied starting January 1st, 1941, by the John Sexton Company, which is like a grocery warehouse. And so this John Sexton warehouse occupied the building until November 14th, 1961. That's the last day it was there. The Texas School Book Depository did not move in until the summer of 1963. I had the impression when I first started looking at this subject back in 1992 that the Texas School Book Depository had been there a long time. But when I saw this document that we'll be talking about later in the program, it clued me in that there was something mysterious about this building that needs investigation. I'd like to read something here from, this was a post that was made by Martin Barkley back in May 24, 2000. It was on the JFK Today forum. And he had contacted a woman who was a good friend of Carolyn Arnold. Carolyn Arnold was the secretary of the vice president of the company. Mm-hmm. And he asked this friend of Carolyn Arnold if he could interview her, ask her some questions. So as it turned out, Miss Arnold flatly refused. She said to her friend that she was terrified. Carolyn says, this is a quote from Martin Barkley's post. Carolyn says there is a whole lot more to tell about the Texas School Book Depository than what has been published. That the whole building should be suspected as more or less of a safe space to operate from that day in November 1963. So, what exactly is Carolyn Arnold talking about? When I first started investigating the book depository and wrote some articles about it, some friends told me that a man named Larry Ray Harris, he was a researcher in Dallas who appeared in The Men Who Killed Kennedy, and friends told me that he used to work at the Texas School Book Depository. So since I had hardly knew anything about it, I thought, oh great, I'll ask him some questions. And as it turned out, he only worked there for 3 weeks in 1970, and this was just at the time that the Texas School Book Depository was moving out of the 411 Elm Street building. And he only worked there for 3 weeks during the summer. And he talked to a few people there, like Junior Jarman, who had like a scrapbook, but he didn't really want to answer questions. And he talked to Roy Truly, and he didn't have much to say either, other than that he asked him what he thought of Oswald, and Roy Truly said, well, he was a lone wolf. So after talking with him a little while, he said, Bill, I have this letter here that I recently got from a professor at Southern Methodist University, and the name on the letters have been blacked out. But if you want to, since you're interested, I'll send you a copy of it. So that's how I got a hold of the Glaze letter.
Can we put that letter up? Can we put that? I'm sorry. Can we put that letter up on the screen, Chance? Sorry. Go ahead.
That's our slide number 2.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Glaze letter. It was typewritten. It's dated June 2nd, 1989, and is written to Doug Kellner and Frank Moreau of the Alternative Information Network in Austin, Texas. I contacted both Doug Kellner and Frank Moreau. Well, first I got a hold of Doug Kellner. He said he didn't know anything about the letter at all. And then I talked to Frank Moreau, and he said he would have remembered this letter if he got it, but he doesn't understand how he could have missed it because he takes care of all the correspondence. So that was kind of as far as I got with them. But anyway, it's addressed to Mr. Kellner and Mr. Moreau. And I'm just going to read a few sections of this letter.
Right.
The first paragraph says, while working as a journalist in Dallas late in 1974 and early 1975, I met and spoke with Lee Harvey Oswald's supervisor at the Texas School Book Depository in Dallas, Texas. At this time, the School Book Depository had been relocated to a warehouse near the intersection of Royal Lane and Interstate 35 in far northwest Dallas. Now, when I first read the letter here and started investigating where the School Book Depository had moved to, by this time in 1974, it had moved to another part of Dallas on Ambassador Row. And I was confused because Ambassador Row is nowhere near the northwest part of Dallas. And so I didn't know what to do with that. Is this letter genuine? Is, what's coming to my mind. Later on, I got to talking with a woman, Dorothy Ann Garner. She worked at the Scott Forsman office in the 411 Elm Street building, and later she continued working with Scott Forsman after they moved out of it. And she knew several people that we're familiar with, like Sandra Stiles, Victoria Adams,
right.
Elsie Dorman, and those people. So I talked to Dorothy Garner, and I asked her, do you know anything about a book depository that was near the Royal Lane and Interstate 35? And she said yes, she did. Before I get into where it was, let's show the next slide here. This is slide number 3. This shows the offices of the Texas School Book Depository on Ambassador Row. This is where I thought where William Shelley was working at the time he met this journalist that we're talking about. This is where I thought they met. But then the next slide shows another view of this same warehouse in the Texas School Book Depository warehouse. as you can see, it's a huge facility.
Now, excuse me, Bill.
Remember how we...
I'm sorry, Bill. I just wanted for our listeners to understand that this is the place where they moved after the 411 Elm Street address, and they moved in 1970, correct? Around 1970?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the building they moved into after they moved out of the 411 Elm Street building in 1970.
Okay.
And remember how that the building is a 7-story building, totally useless as far as operating forklifts. The floors cannot handle forklifts.
That's right.
So a building like this is a single-story facility where forklifts could be used, but it seems like this is a dramatic increase in the scale of their business to go from a place where they used little hand carts, and now they're going with forklifts and pallets, so it seems to me that maybe there's more to this school book depository than just school books. Maybe they're dealing in other things. Mm-hmm. So this is where I thought where the Texas School Book Depository was. And Dorothy Ann Garner, when I talked to her, said, yes, there was something near that area northwest of Dallas, near Royal Lane and Interstate 35. That's where the Scotts Foresman Book Depository was. Scotts Foresman got their own book depository, and slide number 5 shows the old Scotts Foresman building.
Right, it's
the front office area, and this is where William Shelley worked after he left the Texas School Book Depository. He changed jobs, decided to quit that company, and then go to work for Scotts Foresman. So Dorothy Gardner worked with William Shelley at this place. And slide number 6 shows the back area of this same Scotts Foresman facility.
Right.
Now, this place also had the Southwestern Publishing Company, and that was managed by Warren Castor. Warren Castor was the one who brought in the Mauser that Lee Harvey Oswald saw and told the police about it after his arrest. And of course, the Mauser is well known as far as being the first news reports was that
7.6
the assassination weapon was Mauser. Yes.
Right.
William,
so Warren Castor worked. Yes.
May I interject? I'm sure you're going to explain this, and it may have slipped by me, but where was the book depository elsewhere before it was on Elm Street, and what was the duration it was on Elm Street before it moved to this other gigantic facility?
Okay. Let's talk about that. The Texas School Book Depository, before it moved into the 411 Elm Street, its offices were in the Daltex Building, all on the first floor.
Across the street.
And across the street from the 411 Elm Street. And above the Texas School Book Depository offices were Abraham Zubuter's
dress manufacturer,
garment making factory, or clothing manufacturers. Now the Texas School Book Depository had been in that building on the first floor for at least since 1952. It had the warehouse was a separate facility, and we'll see that warehouse. It's actually Can we go to it later, or can we show it now?
We can jump there and then come back if you want to show it briefly. Then.
Okay, let's jump over to
22.
Slide 22.
Right.
Slide 22. This is the
isn't that
the
what
warehouse.
they call the state building? Isn't that what they call the state building? Do you know anything
state
about
building?
Yeah, I've heard some people refer to this as, this was behind the railroad tracks, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is the white building behind the railroad tracks.
Right, right.
This is where the depository workers.
You don't mean behind the grassy knoll, the railroad tracks behind the grassy knoll, do you?
Yeah, that's correct. Behind the grassy knoll.
Yeah, well further back, Jim, where Houston now converges down that way, where in those days Houston turned onto Ross, okay, and then behind there you had all the railroad tracks, and beyond that, in fact, it's right where Bill Wesley Frazier supposedly parked his car, and Warren Commission has all those photographs of his car back there. And supposedly that's well behind there is where that area is.
Bill, let me ask, while it was at the Daltex and the warehouse was here, were they actually doing business involving books?
Yes, they were. They would receive their customers or clients at the Daltex building, but this building here on slide 22, that's where they stored the books.
Right, right.
And it's a 4-story building. And this building was used by the Texas School Book Depository throughout the time that it was on the Daltex building and also at 411 Elm Street.
And was the books...
So when the Texas School Book Depository got the 411 Elm Street, it increased its warehouse capacity twice as much. I would say for a very suspicious reason. Go ahead,
William. Before we return to that, were they actually dealing with school books that were used in the schools of the state of Texas, or were these just miscellaneous books? In other words, how aptly was this title, Texas School Book Depository?
Yes. Let me explain how the School Book Depository worked. In 1908, Texas passed a law whereby school books provided in the schools will be adopted by the state legislature, and so the publishers would then have to not deal directly with the school districts. They dealt directly with the School Book Depository, and they would ship their books to this book depository, and from this book depository they would ship the books out to all the school districts, not only around Texas, but they had business going into Louisiana and Oklahoma and I think New Mexico. And so these school books it was very seasonal. So during the summer months, they would have a whole bunch of school books, and they would just ship them out to these schools. And so they would have school books from various publishers, school book publishers, Bob's Morell, Scott's Forsman, Lyon and Carnahan, Allen and Bacon. All these school book publishers would store their school books at the book depository. Now, when it first started, there was only 2 school book depositories in the whole country, the one in Texas and the one in Atlanta. And then later, other states started using this school book depository process whereby the legislature would adopt the books. Now, most states, the school book publishers would deal directly with the school districts. The salesman would speak to the principals, but in the state of Texas, that wasn't done. The publishers had to go to the Austin, Texas, and lobby the state legislators to get their books adopted. So I hope that's clear.
The Texas Board of Education has always had a disproportionate influence on the publication of textbooks nationwide because they tend to be the most conservative, and publishers don't want to have two editions of the same book. So in general, the edition that was adopted by Texas became the edition that was published nationwide.
Right. Now, shortly after this Texas School Book Depository was established in 1908, a second school book depository was established, also in Dallas, Texas, around in the early 1920s. That was called the Lone Star School Book Depository. And we're going to be talking more about the Lone Star School Book Depository. Very few people know about the Lone Star School Book Depository, and it's mystifying why there's two of these things in Dallas, and in other states they just have one. Now, but I believe that there's, as we'll see, there'll be. I'll explain that, but. The Lone Star School Book Depository, we'll get into later on in the program.
Okay. You want to return to slide number 7?
Right.
Slide number 2. 2.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Going back to the Glaze letter.
All the way to 2. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Going back to the Glaze letter. This is a letter that I later found out was written by a journalist, L.C. Dean Glaze. And he, at this particular time, he was writing a sports column for the local Irving newspaper. And I'm not sure how he managed to get in contact with these people here. But he says further, Bill Shelley, this is a paragraph number 5.
William, before you go there, I just noticed he's talking about how much his notes disappeared, his records disappeared. He was harassed. He was actually driven out of Dallas. I mean, this is extraordinary.
That's right.
Yes. Yes, he was definitely being pursued and harassed, and this is very interesting how and I tried to talk to L.C. Dean Glaze. I didn't know where he was or if he's still alive, but Dawn Meredith, do you know her? She managed. Yeah, she managed to find for me his address and his email. So I wrote him a letter, and he wrote me back and said that he didn't really want to discuss it. He's leaving it into my hands and so forth. I have the letter here. If we have time, we can probably read it. But he doesn't want to get involved in this at all. So I guess in a sense,
he gave at the office, William.
Yeah, I think this is as far as he wants to go with it.
Can't blame him.
So anyway,
at least he's still breathing.
That's right.
At least he's still alive. Yes, I was worried there for a while. But he met a man named Bill Shelley.
Oh,
Bill Shelley was Lee Harvey Oswald's supervisor at the time of the assassination of President Kennedy. And this line sentence is very important. Mr. Shelley claims to have been an intelligence officer during World War II and thereafter joined the CIA. Bill Shelley claims he was arrested by Dallas police and formally charged with the assassination of President Kennedy. He claims the charges were dropped, but he stated that he turned away several newspapers and magazines offering huge amounts of money for his personal account of the assassination. He refuses to let me quote him or use his name in print. So, Mr. Shelley...
William, technically speaking, he didn't even use his name in print here because it's spelled Shelley properly, but only Shelley here.
Right.
Yeah, right. Mr. Glaze says he was no longer certain of the correct spelling of his name. I think what Glaze is showing here is what Carolyn Arnold was alluding to about there's more to the book depository than has been published, and it was served as some kind of what she said a safe base. I'd like to continue on with some of
Bill, excuse me. I just wanted to add the two things here. Shelley, in his affidavit of November 22nd, the same day of the assassination, had this to say: "I have been working closely with this man," when he was talking about Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay, so that right there gives you an idea of the closeness between him and Lee Oswald, where he said it immediately following the assassination on the same day, on November the 22nd.
Could he have been his in-house handler, therefore, in the depository?
That's what we're going to get to.
Covertly or overtly, Lee may or may not have known because, of course, he was being set up as the patsy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think William Shelley was like Oswald's controller.
Yeah.
Go ahead. There's a list of Texas School Book Depository workers, and included the company and the publishers. It's I have the document here somewhere, but at the very top of the list is Harvey Lee Oswald, 605 Elsbeth Street, and then it lists. And I think that's interesting because on his job application for the Texas School Book Depository, it was Lee Harvey Oswald, and people knew him as Lee. So it's strange how he got the name Harvey Lee Oswald on this list. The list was generated by the criminal intelligence department of the police department, and the criminal service section, I think. And this, according to Philip Melanson, who wrote an article, a really good article back in, I think it was March 1985, Dallas Mosaic, he shows how the criminal intelligence sections of police departments of major cities around the country are all connected to the CIA. And he also says that the name Harvey Lee Oswald was mentioned in a request for information from the CIA in 1960, when Lee Harvey Oswald was still in Russia. So the Harvey Lee Oswald name, I believe, is links him to the CIA, and he was like an informant on the intelligence service payroll. So
we know
the intelligence department.
We know from the investigation by Waggoner Carr, the Attorney General of Texas, immediately following the assassination, that he was working as an informant for the FBI, that he had informant number 179, and that he was being paid $200 a month right up to the time of the shooting.
Exactly, that's correct. And so, anyway, getting back to that list, there's all these names of the book depository workers, except for one, and that's William Shelley.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that, like Peter Dale Scott talks about the negative template being significant, the fact that his name is absent, I think, shows that they didn't want to put it on there, and that maybe he had a connection to the police department in that fashion. And it would go right along with what Mr. Glaze says, that he was an intelligence officer during World War II and thereafter joined the CIA. Let's see. Going on further, it says one of the aforementioned employees, whose name I cannot recall, stated that when she went to work for Bill Shelley at the School Book Depository in the early 1970s, she was interviewed for the job by some type of government agents who asked if she had been recruited by the FBI or CIA. As you can well imagine, she was quite confused because the job was low paying and involved minor duties.
Yeah, that certainly suggests the whole op was involved with intelligence, activities from top to bottom, if they're even worried about this low-level employee and whether or not she might have been recruited by one of those agencies. That's rather striking, don't you think, William?
Yes, I do. The more I researched the Kennedy assassination, the more I think that it's more of the Pentagon and the Defense Department that was calling the shots, and the FBI and the CIA were subservient to them. And so,
Bill, would it be safe to
yes?
then? I'm sorry. Would it be safe to state that they had babysitters at the Texas School Book Depository after the assassination for years after, to make sure that people who were wanting to investigate the assassination would stay at bay or kept at bay? For example, when they tried to obtain photographs of Billy Lovelady, all the fights that happened outside of the TSBD and that kind of thing. I'm talking about agents that remained on the premises after the assassination for years.
Oh yeah, I think that's true. I think that the Texas School Book Depository continued to be a very secretive organization, and it's extremely hard to dig out information about this company. I've talked to a number of people, and they just refuse to talk, either out of fear or like one person I talked to was just a dread of being killed, I guess. So, but I think that
not unreasonable concern, incidentally.
Yeah, not unreasonable, that's for sure. So if they have that fear going on, I think that that whatever the Texas School Book Depository did in 1963, they had things going on before 1963 and continuing past 1963, and I think we'll see that as we go in more into these slides here. Let me read just a few more things here. This employee said that fellow employees were suspected in similar job interviews for government agents. As mentioned, this woman, her husband, and young child disappeared within hours after my interview. Their apartment looked as if no one had ever lived in it. All I remember is that her husband was previously a member of the musical group, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. She didn't show up for work the next day and didn't pick up her final check. Their whereabouts are completely unknown, even as of 1989.
If she didn't pick up her final check, William, she may well be among the dear departed.
Yes, I believe that is correct. And then he says, the day after their disappearance, an estimated 20 Dallas policemen pulled up in front of my apartment. They lingered in front of my apartment for nearly an hour, pointing their pistols at my window and shouting in a very threatening manner. As mentioned, I was forced to flee Dallas until another day.
That's bizarre. That is bizarre.
So Elsie Dean Glaze eventually ended up in Lubbock, Texas, where he got a job with the journal Avalanche, I believe it is. And then he says, this information has never been made public. Feel free to use any part of it as you please. Then he says, I will help in any way. I just want to be forewarned. There is a very large spider guarding this web of secrecy. I have entered other webs, but this one is different because the spider leaves the web and stalks its prey, sometimes for many years. So even in 1989, 15 years after he wrote Talk to Shelley, he felt like his life was not secure. So that's the Glaze letter. And so investigating the Glaze letter, I tried to find out more about William Shelley.
Next slide.
William.
Slide number
slide
7.
Number 7.
There you go.
Okay, the man circled on the far right is William Shelley, and it looks like he's being escorted by the police. And if Mr. Glaze is correct, he's under arrest.
Yeah.
There's no apparently no record of him being arrested, and the only hint that we know of is what Elsie Glaze has said.
Larry, in relation to this photograph, have we identified other parties here, such as the guy on the left front?
Danny Arce is the man on the left, whom we also know to have been the man on the walkie-talkie in the Alton 6 photograph. And it seems to me like these men are under arrest, Jim. You know, it's not like they're being escorted by a policeman with a shotgun, you know.
Yeah, but bear in mind, Larry, that the 3 tramps were being similarly escorted. And in fact, it was just a simulated or fake arrest. They weren't actually under arrest. They were being escorted, away.
I know, but the faces on the cops in the tramps photographs are very leisure, and they're smiling and everything. These guys have real, mean scowls on their faces, both the one in the front and the back. So
Shelley looks like a rather ugly guy when you come down to it.
He looks kind of concerned here. He looks very concerned.
Pretty strange. Yeah. William, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you just notice that his facial features and his hairline, he looks like he has quite a widow's peak there, and his cheeks are kind of sunken in. This is William Shelley. And let's go to the next slide. This is William Shelley showing a dog. This is back in October 1957 in Dallas Morning News. and he's showing a Kerry Blue Terrier, and he has and he's kneeling by the dog, and he has the leash in his right hand. But I look at the facial features, and it seems like the widow's peak that's so prominent in the photograph with the police is absent, and it just seems that the facial features are don't seem very natural. It seems like they've been modified somewhat. So I think that even in 1957, they didn't want to show his real face in the newspapers.
So you think it was touched up? Touched up.
I think it was touched up. Yeah.
So was Shelley showing the dog? Because they touched up his face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
And I think that photo retouching is something that we often see in the dealing with the assassination.
Absolutely.
But I think it's and then we have another slide. It's a close up of William Shelley, and it looks like the pouring. He's getting some coffee from. I think it looks like it's in the police department.
And it's pretty clear that Widow's Peak is there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so you're
really clear there.
A bit of it. You don't see all of his hairline, but
and his cheek seems very.
That really is an ugly dude, I'll tell you.
Yeah, he certainly is. The interesting thing is, I did get to talk to William Shelley back in 1995, and
tell us more about that. Tell us more about that. You're probably the only researcher in modern JFK history to have ever spoken to this man, William.
Yeah. Well, I had a phone disc program. Gave all in 1993, gave all the names and addresses of everybody across the country, all 50 states. And so I saw, well, maybe William Shelley's in here, and he was, and his address and phone number. So I called him up, and he was very unfriendly, of course, and he said everything about the assassination is all written up in the Warren Report. I have nothing more to say. And usually, in my experience,
and of course, the Warren Report got it right.
Yeah. People who refuse to talk will, if you say, "Well, I just got one question," and they're generally willing to answer just one question. So I couldn't really think of anything better than it was Oswald at work every day. And he said, yes, he was there every day. So so that's about the extent of my conversation with William Shelley. And about a year later, he died.
He wasn't going to give any secrets away, that's for sure.
No, that's for sure. Yeah, he was not going to answer any questions. And he died just 1 year later, or a year and a half later, at the age of 70.
70, natural.
Born in 19. I assume natural causes.
Only the good die young.
Right. So let's go to the next slide. This is a picture of the Nitty Gritty dirt band in the 1970s, and this band was mentioned in the Glaze letter. According to Mr. Glaze, he met the wife of a musician who worked with the Nitty Gritty dirt band, or was one of the musicians for it, and then he disappeared. So in investigating this part of the letter, the Nitty Gritty dirt band their most famous hit is Mr. Bojangles, and they're a pretty popular group in their time. They drew tens of thousands of people to their concerts, and they even played in the Soviet Union. So when I started asking around about the various musicians that were still around in 1999, what they know about a musician who disappeared, they didn't know anything about this musician who disappeared. All the main members of the group I accounted for. And then I talked to one musician, Les Thompson, I believe it is, and his name is. And Les Thompson said back in the 70s they had like an orchestra, a 10-member orchestra to back them up, and the musicians that were in this orchestra were kind of in and out. So he felt that maybe it was, and this was back at the same time period that we're talking about, 1974, 1975. He felt that maybe it was one of those temporary musicians that they employed. And they did like a couple of gigs in Dallas during that time period, 1974. So the mystery of who this musician was is I was never able to solve. So,
do you have any reason to believe he was related to the assassination in any way?
I think so. I think that maybe from talking to Elsie Dean Glaze, he had notes and tape recordings, and maybe they were disappeared. So I think it was definitely related to the assassination, the disappearance of the musician and his wife.
No wonder Glaze doesn't want to talk anymore.
Yeah. Okay, so this kind of gave me an idea that there's more to the book. There's something spooky about the Texas School Book Depository, and so I wanted to find out as much as I can about who worked there, what they did, how long they worked there, and so forth. The next slide, slide 11, shows the president of the School Book Depository in a military uniform. This is Jack Charles Kaysen. Jack Charles Kaysen got involved with the School Book Depository in the early 1930s. He immediately rose to president, and that's what he was during World War II. And during World War II, he spent most of his time at the Mineral Wells Army base near Fort Worth, Texas. He would go there on Monday mornings and then come back to Dallas Friday evening. So he would spend like 5 days there and spend his weekends at home. And this was during World War II. So this kind of gave me an idea that people were living double lives. Going back to William Shelley, if you look up the city directories of William Shelley through the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, it will list him as a clerk or a department manager within the Texas School Book Depository. So it appears that he would have a continuous employment at the Texas School Book Depository and didn't go off in other places. But then he had this double life of being an intelligence officer and a CIA agent at the School Book Depository. And here we see the president of the School Book Depository also having kind of a double life. The school, while at the same time that he was president of the Texas School Book Depository, he was working with the Army during the World War II. I got this picture. It's interesting. The pictures of Kaysen are extremely rare. I never saw a picture of him before until I came across an autobiography of his wife, Gladys Kaysen, that she wrote back in the 1990s. It was on, I think it was on Amazon, but when I tried to get it through Amazon, the book was just not available for some reason.
That's curious. That's curious all by itself, though, isn't it, William? That the wife of the guy who'd been the president of the book depository should have a biography or an autobiography. It's not as though she's a prominent figure in Dallas society, is it?
Well, both of them were really prominent in Dallas society. They were. Both of them were. Both of them were often in the society pages of the newspapers.
Okay.
Because they had like parties at their house. They had a huge mansion, and they loved antiques. They would have 18th century French furniture with all the ornate gilding on it that would seem to indicate they had a tremendous amount of wealth. So Gladys Kaysen kind of wrote about those kind of things, and she even puts in some of her recipes. She calls it the Texas School Book Depository recipes, and so you can. It's the first assassination book I ever seen with recipes in it.
We might have time for one more photograph before we have to take our break, William, if that's a good idea. Or is this a better place
I'd like to. Maybe we could take it now because I'd like to dwell on Kaysen just a little bit more.
That'll be just fine. This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal, where William Weston has an encyclopedic knowledge of the book depository. We're very pleased to have him here with Larry Rivera. After this break, we'll be right back.
We can now say with moral certainty and considerable scientific authority that the death of JFK was committed by a meticulously executed conspiracy which was obscured by an extensive cover-up. Murder in Dealey Plaza, edited by James Fetzer, goes to the heart of the JFK assassination. You'll read new and up-to-date information regarding the Secret Service, the Lincoln limousine, the medical evidence, the cover-up, altering the film, framing the patsy, and the silent historians. Also, 16 smoking guns, each one crushing the government's lone assassin scenario. A world-class chronology of November 22nd, 1963. Chapters by David W. Mantic, Gary Aguilar, Vincent Palomero, Douglas Weldon, Jack White, Ira David Wood III, James H. Fetzer, Doug Horn, and a classic essay by Bertrand Russell. The complete story in the pages of one single book, edited by James H. Fetzer. Read it now, read it again. You'll use it as a reference. Murder in Dealey Plaza. Available at Amazon.com and major bookstores around the world. It's murder.
Less than 3% of you people read books, because less than 15% of you read newspapers. Right now, there is an entire generation that never knew anything that didn't come out of this tube. This tube can make or break presidents, popes, prime ministers. Television is not the truth. Television is a circus, a carnival, a traveling troupe of acrobats, storytellers, dancers, singers, jugglers, sideshow freaks, lion tamers, and football players. We deal in illusions, man. None of it is true. But you people sit there day after day, night after night, all ages, colors, creeds.
Broadcasting live on network radio.
So turn off your television sets, turn them off now, turn them off and leave them off.
This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal.
In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade.
It looks like one of those scenes of an old building being purposely dynamited and blown.
When we are successful,
I'm just a patsy.
and we will be,
We're ready to come to the microphone, so we'll listen up.
a new world order.
So my name's Robbie Parker.
It might have appeared that way, but from my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m.
Live from the Media Broadcasting Center.
Oh, I got to bring us in. Chance? This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal. We're continuing my conversation with William Weston and Larry Rivera about the Texas School Book Depository, its history, and some of those who were involved in its activities. William, please continue.
Okay, yes. So we talked about the vice president of the School Book Depository and how during World War II he was in the Army. Let's go to our next slide. And this is Joe Molina. Larry Rivera got this picture for me from a newspaper article. Joe Molina was in the Navy, and then he went into got employed by the Texas School Book Depository in the 1950s, mid 1950s, I believe. And he was like, he managed the accounts, but he also had a double life. He worked with an FBI informant, William Lowry, who infiltrated groups, Hispanic groups like
GI Forum,
LULAC, and the American GI Forum. William Lowry was you've done a lot of work on William Lowry, Larry. Do you want to say something about Joe Molina a little bit?
Yeah, and Joe Molina, I've done extensive research on Joe Molina, and I just wanted to say that if you look at in the context of the times, the 1950s, a Mexican American, most Mexicans in those days were digging ditches, okay? So a Mexican national, because both of his parents were bona fide Mexicans who migrated into Dallas in the 20s, okay? And for Joe to have had a desk job in those days was quite an accomplishment, all right? So obviously he had been in the Navy and he had been in the military, and he came in as a credit as a bookkeeper actually, and eventually he went up as credit manager. And his job mostly was doing all the credit invoices and posting the ledgers of all the companies that bought from the Texas School Book Depository Company, distributing the books and everything, and keeping those ledgers. Some people have thought that maybe he did payroll and everything like that, but that's not the case. He was just keeping ledgers there. Well, that was officially his capacity. But go ahead. And Bill Lowry and him worked together infiltrating, or at least with the GI Forum, which had to do with Mexican Americans making sure that their rights were respected and that kind of thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, and so we see here we have somebody working at the Texas School Book Depository who had another life where he's also infiltrating leftist groups for the FBI. Now, going back to Jack Kaysen, the president, because he served in the Army during the World War II years, that qualified him to be in the American Legion. And he was very active in the American Legion from September 1945. And he was elected commander of Post 53 in Dallas. Now, the American Legion was closely connected with the FBI. In 1940, J. Edgar Hoover began recruiting volunteer informants from the American Legion. And by 1943, the FBI had engaged some 60,000, quote, reliable Legion members belonging to some 11,000 posts around the country as confidential informants. Among the tasks assigned to these legionnaires was safeguarding the security of defense plants, transportation facilities, and public utilities. So Jack Kaysen, even after the war, being a prominent member of the American Legion, would surely have known and been sympathetic and maybe involved with some of this, being a confidential informant, watching out for the security of defense plants and other things around Dallas. So let's go on to our next slide. This is Roy Truly. Roy Truly at the police department. Roy Truly was the one who employed Lee Harvey Oswald on October 15th, 1963. Now, the interesting thing about Lee Harvey Oswald, maybe I'll get back to him in a bit, but Roy Truly, he began working for the book depository in 1934, but during the World War II years, he was working at an aircraft plant, North American Aviation. What he did there, he did not say in his testimony, but I suspect, considering the role of Joe Molina and Jack Kaysen, I would suspect that he was also kind of involved with the security of the aviation manufacturing or aircraft manufacturing industry.
Roy Truly has always come across to me, William, as a basically very honest guy. You may know things I don't, but that's the way he's always struck me.
That could be true. He did have very strong right-wing views. He was in Manchester's book, Death of a President. He was said to be against Kennedy, and he was also an ultra-segregationist. He may not have been involved in some of the activities that Joe Molina was doing, but he might have been aware of it and might have known what was going on. And in Jim Marr's book, Crossfire, he talks about how Roy Truly was afraid for his life for what he knew, and he was afraid of what he quote federal authorities. So I think
how did Roy's life end?
In the 1980s? He died in 1985, I believe it was.
Okay. Nothing unusual about.
We don't really know how he died, or it appears that Jim Marrs tried to talk to one of his, I think, a daughter, and she didn't want to say too much about him or whatever. There's a little bit in the newspapers regarding Roy Truly. He loved dogs, like William Shelley. He would show Carrie Blue Terriers. And there's a picture of Roy Truly in the same newspaper showing the same breed of dog with William Shelley. Now, it's interesting that the picture of Roy Truly looks like Roy Truly as we see him in this picture, but the picture of Bill Shelley that we showed earlier, that doesn't look like Bill Shelley at all.
Right.
So that's a comparison there.
Suggesting Shelley had more covert role than did Roy Truly.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, definitely. And then we have a close-up view of Roy Truly.
Slide 14.
On slide number 14. He was the one that got the application, and there's two applications that with the Lee Harvey Oswald signature. There's like two different signatures, so there's something going on there, and also the attendance records are kind of strange too. It listed the names of the warehouse employees, and it would give it was vertical and horizontal lines, and would give the number of hours they worked, and all of them worked like 8 hours. And the thing about it is that there's three forms that we see in the depository record covering the 6 weeks that Lee Harvey Oswald worked at the book depository, and all three of them look like they're handmade. It looks like somebody had taken a ruler and drew all those vertical and horizontal lines and typed in the names of the book depository workers. So each of these three forms have differences, and so you would think that a company that generates so much income that the president can buy all this expensive antique furniture could afford to go to a printer and print up attendance forms to so they don't have to generate them handmade every time.
It sounds like these were ad hoc replacements, William, for the originals.
Yes. Yeah. And one of those forms one form has Lee Oswald at the bottom, and another form has Leslie Oswald. So
Wesley
Oswald.
That's a new one.
Leslie Oswald.
Leslie. Okay.
So, how much Roy Truly was involved with these after the fact paperwork, I'm not sure what his role is. But going to the next slide is Joe Bergen. Joe Bergen, there's two views of him. One is as a teacher in the 1920s, and then there's a newspaper article about him in 1930s becoming a salesman for a book company. And he's the office manager of Scott's Foresman at the 411 Elm Street building. He was a school superintendent in Greenville, Texas, and while he was there, he joined the Texas Rangers. Apparently during the 1930s, the governor felt like with all the lawlessness in Texas, like the Bonnie and Clyde gang and others, she needed to recruit special rangers, and Joe Bergen was one of the special Texas Rangers. Now, when you look at the city directories, it doesn't have anything about him being in the Texas Rangers, but I did find his records covering the 1934 to 1936. The later ones have not been released yet. The Texas Rangers were involved in watching the borders for spies. This was during World War II, and they were involved in enforcing the law regarding drugs. And so he might have, as a Texas Ranger, might have been involved in some of that. Now, when I looked at his obituary, there were two obituaries. One of them said that he was a veteran during World War II. And that's curious because if you look at the city directories, he's always been office manager, Scott Sporsman Publishing Company, associated with the Texas School Book Depository. So that little line in the obituary indicates that maybe he continued his role as a ranger from the 1930s into the 1940s and on into the 1960s. Now, I talked to his son, Joe Bergen Jr., and he gave me a lot of information about his father. And he said that after the assassination, let me back up. On the day of the assassination, he was on an airplane headed back to Dallas, Texas. He had been at a meeting in Chicago for the Scott Sporsman, and he was coming back. But after the assassination, he was talking with police officers, FBI people, and other mysterious people, and they treated him like he was like a colleague, swapping stories. And these conferences were at his home on Gaston Avenue. So here again, as we saw with Jack Kaysen and Joe Molina, Joe Bergen is also leading a double life, being a office manager for a publishing company by day, and by night going off and being a Texas Ranger. The Texas Rangers were involved in recording, doing surveillance on the Chicago mobs moving into Dallas in the after the war, 1940s, and maybe Joe Bergen was involved with that. That's my guess. Let's go on to the next slide. This is a picture of Billy Nolan Lovelady.
Very familiar, a very familiar photograph indeed.
Very familiar, yes. Larry and you have talked a lot about Billy Lovelady. Maybe Larry, you could fill us in on what he was caught stealing military weapons back in 1960.
Yeah, revolvers. Yeah, we spoke about this 2 nights ago. It was a little gang of airmen stealing stuff, at the supply depot, and in this case, they stole some revolvers and tried to fence them at a bar, and they got in trouble for that, and eventually being court-martialed out of the Air Force. After that, Billy was on the lam for more than a year. After he skipped town on a fine that he was paying $25 a month on. And then the DA found out that he was missing because the letters started to come back undelivered from the postman. And when this happened, he He brought in the FBI, and the FBI, because he obviously wasn't in Maryland anymore, and the FBI tracked him down in January 1963, working at the Texas School Book Depository Company while they were there next door at the Daltex Building. Now, Billy, during all of this time, had been hired, and he had already been working for the company for more than a year. Now, that seems to me very, very strange indeed, in light of this situation where we have identified at least four alternate patsies, including, and I just wanted to mention briefly Joe Molina, because the night of the assassination, Joe Molina was paid a visit at 1:30 in the morning and rousted up by Captain Ganaway, Lieutenant Reville, DA Bill Alexander. They woke him up. They searched his house for anything that would weapons or explosives that would link him with Lee Harvey Oswald. And Bill Wesley Frazier, who the night of the assassination was Bill Fritz tried to make him sign a confession the night of the assassination. So when you look at in the context of alternate patsies, where maybe Lee Harvey Oswald would not be able to control him in the way that they had planned, then you look at these other alternate patsies, and you start to fill in the picture of maybe Billy Molina and Bill Wesley Frazier were part of this group. And then what's so amazing to me is that all four of them were in the entrance of the TSBD. So briefly, yeah.
So
yeah, that's our love lady thing.
Yeah, so he's involved in stealing military weapons, and so and then did you say that Mr. Campbell, the vice president, bailed him out of jail?
That's correct. He paid his fine. V. Campbell paid his fine, and then they posted a bond, $1,200 bond, and they let him stay in Texas, and everything was filed after that. So what were the forces involved here? It seems to me kind of strange, And then another thing that the fact that Billy Lovelady ends up working for the TSBD, a company who supposedly was very strict in the manpower and the people that they hired, and who frowned upon people of this ilk who actually, had been in trouble the way he had, and had been dishonorably discharged from the Air Force. And we know that from Laura Kittrell, who worked at the Texas Employment Commission and wrote a very compelling manuscript for the HSCA, which was never used, by the way, and where she described how her interactions with the Texas School Book Depository Company for 30 years, mind you, and she knew exactly how these people and what their habits were as far as hiring personnel. So this all does not seem to me very right here, Bill.
Yes, definitely. So, and then we have the next slide is our well-known picture of Lee Harvey Oswald.
They beat up Lee Harvey Oswald.
Beat up Lee Harvey Oswald at the police department, and he was the patsy. I think that Lee Harvey Oswald, he definitely had connections with the intelligence. I believe his stint in Russia was part of a CIA operation, and then when he came back to the States, he was involved in with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, writing letters to communist leaders, and he wasn't a genuine leftist. I believe he was doing it as part of an operation to watch and possibly bring down these organizations. So here he was working at the book depository.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to very briefly mention: is it possible that Lee's the way that what they used in order to get Lee into the TSBD might have been as an assignment to perhaps investigate some of this gun running activities and whatever at the TSBD?
I have a different opinion on that. I think that he knew that the assassination was coming up, and he was told that to be like a decoy, to act in a suspicious manner to draw the attention of the police, and then that would give the shooters a chance to get away. And of course, being a decoy, he would know that there was no evidence that could the police could bring against him to accuse him of being assassinating the president. There's really no evidence that he ever handled a rifle in 1963. The only witnesses that claimed to have seen a rifle in his house were the George and Jean DeMornshield back in April of '63. And I think that is questionable. And when he was in the police department answering questions, it seems like he was always disputing the evidence, the photograph, the backyard photograph. He said that that's been a modified photograph.
His face pasted on someone else's body.
Yes. So when I think it was around 8 o'clock Friday night that he made the IN a patsy statement, and I think between the time that he was arrested and that evening, he must have realized that he was in deep trouble. That he was the patsy and not just another agent doing an assignment.
William, at this point, we have 10 slides and 30 minutes, so just to mention.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to the next slide. This is William Harvey.
King
CIA
Harvey.
agent. That's his obit. What?
King Harvey.
Oh, King Harvey.
Yeah.
CIA aide. He dies at 60, linked to anti-Castro plotting. Many people have looked at this man and seen his activities in 1963 as assassination related, that he was involved in plotting the assassination.
Well, if you listen to E. Howard Hunt's confession to his son, St. John, the chain of command went from Lyndon Johnson to Cord Meyer to David Atlee Phillips to William Harvey, and then to David Sanchez Morales, and below them the mechanics and supervisors in Dealey Plaza.
Yes. Yeah, I think they're correct in saying that he was very much involved. Now, there's a line in here in the last paragraph. At the time of his death, Mr. Harvey was law editor for Bobbs Morell Publishing Company. Bobbs Morell is publishes all kinds of books, but it also publishes school books, and that Bobbs Morell school books were shipped down to the Texas School Book Depository from its headquarters in Indianapolis. So here we have a man who heavily involved in the CIA, but ends his life at a school book company. And so I'm trying to paint a picture here of school books being a spooky business. Mm-hmm. And let's go to the next slide here. This is Newcomb Mott. He was a school book salesman in 1965 for Van Nostrand company, publishing company. Van Nostrand had an office with the Texas School Book Depository. But here we have a school book salesman trying to enter the Soviet Union illegally. And the Russians accused him of being a CIA agent, but they couldn't make that charge stick, so they accused him of being illegal entry into the country. And this is the same path that Lee Harvey Oswald did back in 1959, only he succeeded in getting into the Soviet Union and staying there. Nukem Mott tragically died in Soviet hands. They said that I forget what he somehow he suffocated in water or something by falling. But the American Embassy, when they looked into the case, they said that they looked at his body and his throat was cut. So anyway, here we have a school book businessman doing espionage kind of activities. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. This is we're going to go in this part of the program. We're going to be talking about the timing of when the School Book Depository moved into the building, which I believe is assassination related. It's all part of the conspiracy. I found this document back in 1993. It says here, it's dated November 23rd, 1963. Roy S. Truly, warehouse manager, Texas School Book Depository, advised that the Texas School Book Depository has occupied the building at 411 Elm Street for only a few months.
This was on the 22nd. This was on the 22nd. It was written up on the 23rd, but this is, if you look at the bottom, it was exactly on the 22nd.
Oh, exactly on the 22nd, yes.
Yes.
Now, this is this kind of started me on the Texas School Book Depository angle because I thought it had been there for years. So one of the questions I was asking people who work there is when the book depository moved in. I talked to the vice president, O.V. Campbell, and like with Shelley, he was very unfriendly, didn't want to talk to me, but he was willing to answer one question. The question I asked, well, when did the book depository move in? He said it was like 5 years before the assassination.
But that's false.
And that's false. That's false. And then I talked to the manager of the Macmillan Company, which had an office at 411 Elm Street. He was there, Spalding Jones. I asked him when did the book depository, as well as his own company, moved into the 411 Elm Street. He said he remembers it to be 1957. That was the same year he bought a favorite car, he said. Again, a false statement. And Jack Kaysen was telling news reporters, the Dallas Morning News, there was an article in which they were, he said that the book depository had been in that building since 1960. So from three different sources, we have the
shortest period of time is clearly correct. Roy Truly is speaking the truth, and the others are being deceptive.
That's correct. Now, investigating what this, I went to the city directories. The city directories all show that the 411 Elm Street building was occupied by this John Sexton Company. That's the next slide, slide 21. This shows the 411 Elm Street with the signs on it, Sexton Quality Foods.
That's from the side, of course, not the
from
front.
the side.
Yeah.
Yes, it's from the side. Yes.
Yeah, from the side. And I think you could see that the word Sexton is on the front of the building in
yes, right.
Large letters.
Yes.
The city directories show that the Sexton building had been in there in 1961. It was vacant in 1962, and it was occupied by the Book Depository and the other publishers in 1963. So the city directories confirm what Roy Truly said. Then I interviewed the Sexton employees. One of them was Ted Leon, who was the manager of the Sexton, John Sexton Company. He said that he showed me I visited him, and he showed me his day planner books, and he kept them. And he showed me November 14th, 1961, was the day they actually vacated the premises. And then they moved to a single-story facility in another part of Dallas. They didn't like this building because they couldn't use their forklifts in there. And then I talked to another guy, Thomas Butler, who was assistant manager. He said that the building had been vacant for a year after they left, so that would put the time frame, the chronology of the vacancy into the fall of '62. So the earliest that the Texas School Book Depository could move in there would be late '62 and 1963, and so forth. Okay, we can skip the slide 22 that shows the Texas School Book Depository warehouse.
You could show it and then just move past it. Yeah, since we've already discussed it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. How much time do we have left here?
Well, let me see. We have 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. In this part of the program, I'd like to talk about the Lone Star School Book Depository, also located in Dallas. Slide 23 shows an article of the Lone Star School Book Depository, and it's moving to a new location. And the date of this article is November 18th, 1962. So here we have the Lone Star School Book Depository moving to a new building at the same time that the Texas School Book Depository is moving into a new building. And let's look at some more about this particular School Book Depository. It also functioned as a place for holding books for publishers and shipping them out to schools. And they would also have offices for publishers as well. The next map shows the Dallas and a city map of Dallas, and there's in a red box JCS. You see that there?
Yes, Jaggers Childs.
Jaggers Childs Stovall on Browder Road, or Browder Street. That's where Lee Harvey Oswald worked from October '62 to April of '63, and Jaggers Childs Stovall had done classified work for the Army, done labeling for maps, for secret purposes. So this company is it also does advertising work, the typesets, puts pictures together for other companies around Dallas. But some of its work was related to the military establishment. Now, the next slide 25, is a close-up of this area. You'll see Jaggers Child Stovall. I got it JCS in that one box.
Next slide.
Slide 25, Chance.
25.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, see where Jaggers Child Stovall is on Browder Street. That box there.
Right.
And it just down the street is the Lone Star School Book Depository, number 45 box, just a block away. So I believe that if the Texas School Book Depository was providing intelligence, security for or counterintelligence against people who might be want to find out what Jaggers Child Stovall, Lone Star School Book Depository people might have been involved in providing security for that. The owner of the Lone Star School Book Depository was very prominent in the news back in the 1950s. His name is Ross Carlton. He was very much against the blacks and civil rights, and very much against John F. Kennedy too. And the proximity of these two businesses is very interesting. That at one time, when Lee Harvey Oswald was walking out of Jaggers Child Stovall, he could just look down the street and see the Lone Star School Book Depository. And so he must have known the spooky connections with the school books. And I just think it's interesting that they're so close together.
Bill, can I make a comment here? Can I make a quick comment here?
Yes.
I just wanted to say that in 1991, Harrison Livingstone interviewed the Reverend Jack Shaw, and Jack Shaw was the Reverend to Roscoe White and Geneva White and their family, and he told Harrison Livingstone that Jaggers Child Stovall was actually used as the center of operations for the assassination on November 22nd, 1963.
Wow.
All right.
Okay,
that's in High Treason 2. That's on page 492 of High Treason 2. Okay.
Okay.
That's my source.
Okay. Now, the Lone Star School Book Depository had been at this location since the 1930s, and then all of a sudden, in 1962, it decides to move at a different location. So the next slide shows the location of the, I got a Google map here of the location of the School Book Depository. And it was off of Harry Hines Boulevard. Do you see where the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center purchasing department is? That's where the Lone Star School Book Depository was in 1963.
Upper left-hand corner, white building.
Okay, and now you see there's this area has been totally modified, but there's a rail line that goes past the Lone Star School Book Depository and crosses Harry Hines Boulevard and continues on at the bottom. Now this railroad at the bottom, do you see that there?
Yes.
The railroad cross. This is in 19 at the present time it's been elevated up, and it's more of a like a metro rail around the city. But back in 1963, Vincent Bugliosi, in his book Parkland, talks about this particular railroad crossing. In that part of the book, he tells us that Will Greer, after the president had been shot, and they were going towards Parkland Hospital, they were going up Harry Hines Boulevard, and as they approached the railroad crossing, he should have slowed down because it was kind of elevated up. You could only cross it but at a crawl. But he was taking the limousine so fast that when he hit this crossing, the limousine kind of went flying and almost collided with one of the police escort motorcycles. So we almost had a disaster right here at this railroad crossing. Now, the point I want to make is that if this railroad crossing needed to be crossed at a crawling speed, in one direction, certainly would have to be at a crawling speed at the other direction. Harry Hines Boulevard was the alternate route for the presidential motorcade. If they had not, if the Secret Service had not chosen the motorcade route down Mockingbird Lane and down Main Street and through Dealey Plaza, they would have taken this route down Harry Hines Boulevard, and sitting right at the most dangerous part of the road is the Lone Star School Book Depository, and it would have an excellent. It would have been an excellent place of an ambush right there, because the motorcade had to slow down for this motorcade or for this railroad crossing. And of course, if the pilot car was leading the way, they would maybe even exaggerate the slowness of the speed. I believe they were involved in conspiracy to kill Kennedy. So either way, if Kennedy had gone down this way, he would have fallen. He would have been going into a dangerous trap, or going down Dealey Plaza. There was school book depositories at both locations. So I think it's not a coincidence that both book depositories moved during the winter, spring, and summer of 1963 into new buildings or different buildings, and that they both be in buildings that were overlooking the most dangerous parts of the motorcade, of the potential motorcade routes.
Those are excellent observations, William, and I think got a further substantiation of the extent to which a detailed planning was taking place in anticipation of a visit by the President of the United States that had yet to be planned, yet to be announced.
Contingencies.
Yes, so I think that the conspirators were making plans to make sure that Kennedy did not leave Dallas alive.
Wow.
and they had both routes covered.
Wow.
So the next slide shows a picture. This is slide 27. On the left is, this is at a football game.
Yeah.
On the left
Texas. It's a Texas football game.
We lost William.
Texas Longhorns.
William, can we hear you?
Uh-oh. I think we lost them.
Larry, can you identify the players?
This is D. Harold Bird. Okay.
On the left, who is the owner of the book depository.
He bought the building in the 30s, and he tried to establish an air conditioning operation, and that did not go too well. And then from there, he leased it to the Sexton Food Company, which Bill was talking about. And then from there, obviously, what Bill filled us in on the move from the Daltex Building over to the Texas School Book Depository Building, 411. But very interesting to note that D. Harold Bird was on a safari in Africa for the week of November 22nd, or the weekend of November 22nd, during the assassination.
Sure, of course.
And furthermore, he had the window of on the 6th floor, the southeast corner of the School Book Depository window removed, okay, and placed in at his house as a trophy, okay.
Well, no shots were actually fired from there, Larry, but yes, still a trophy. And isn't the man in the middle, isn't that our president of the book depository?
Jack Kaysen? Well, I'm not sure, but I know.
And on the right is Lyndon Johnson.
Obviously, yes. And another thing, this photograph had always been cropped, and we always saw D. Harold Bird in the picture. Okay, but it had been extremely cropped. But then this picture appeared in its uncropped form, and obviously we know who the man on the right is. This is like 1969, after Lyndon was out of the White House, where he was hanging out at his ranch most of the time, and already back in Texas. And obviously, to see these two men together at a football game is quite scandalous.
Well, that's rather profoundly disturbing, yes. And then we have the final photograph, the final slide, Chance, which, of course, is the very window that he would have had removed, except it would be further to the left, Larry. I mean, you know.
This photograph, what this photograph depicts are these crates, these wooden crates, because we really didn't get much into the gun running operation that Bill has told us about in his marvelous article, The Spider's Web, and where he has identified these crates as the vehicles where guns and ammunition and armaments, which, and in fact, these crates weighed upwards of 405 to 500 pounds. And obviously, they do not contain school books. They're not even close. They do not even closely resemble the cartons that we see throughout the photographs of the Texas School Book Depository, the 6th floor, and everything during the weekend of the assassination. And you can see that these crates are totally different. And you can see they are extremely heavy. And this is one of the major points that Bill Weston makes in most of his articles here, especially the one that I just mentioned, that the School Book Depository Company was involved in this gun running, especially to Cuba, shipping to New Orleans, from there on to Cuba, and that this was proof that he found of that type of operation there.
That's all excellent, Larry. I'm very, very pleased that you were able to collaborate with William Weston in putting together this presentation, because I think some of the most telling points are the period of time that the actual occupation of the Elm Street address took place, which was quite close in proximity to the assassination, and the moving to new locations of two book stores, book depositories, which, you know, that's a very peculiar aspect to it. It suggests to me that these book companies were CIA assets.
Absolutely.
You know, John C. Marvin Holt emphasized to me how the CIA has many assets, and they have these innocuous sounding names, like the Los Angeles Stamp and Stationery Store, which was a 5-story building in Los Angeles, where the first 3 stories were a legitimate business, and the top 2 were run by the CIA with their ID manufacturing operation where they prepared the Alec Heidel identification for Lee Oswald, and where Chauncey was instructed by his handler at the time, Philip Twombly, to prepare 15 sets of forged Secret Service credentials for use in and around Dealey Plaza, where he was worried about getting the color-coded pins, which changed from day to day, but he got that information in time. Went to Dealey Plaza, where he'd been instructed to leave them in a red pickup truck that would be parked above the grassy knoll, which, of course, as you understand, was used by the Dallas Police Department. It wasn't there at the time, so he wandered around Dealey Plaza. He told me he saw more bad guys, assassins, and mercenaries than you'd find at a Soldiers of Fortune convention. That he went back to the pickup truck, to the area, and the pickup truck was there, so he left the ID, and he and Charles Harrelson and a man he knew as Richard Montoya, who was actually Charles Rogers, were instructed to go to a boxcar that would appear to be locked, but actually would be unlocked. When they climbed in, they discovered it was loaded with explosives, weapons, and ammunition, where the train started to pull out, but the supervisor thought something was funny, brought it back in. And, of course, they were arrested and marched through Dealey Plaza, where I'm inclined to believe, Larry, that they were therefore fallback patsies. Now, it looks as though there have been multiple fallback patsies, but the fact that they were in a boxcar that was loaded with ammunition, explosives, and weapons strongly suggests to me that they would have had a not very difficult case in implicating the three tramps, who actually were no such thing, in fact, as having been participants in the assassination, had the original designated Patsy Lee Oswald not worked out.
They had all the angles covered, most definitely, Jim. They had their contingencies and everything, and like I mentioned earlier, all the people that were in the entrance of the Texas School Book Depository. But there was just one last point that I wanted to make, and it had to do with this James Wilcott, who was a CIA asset, and after he retired, well, he started to talk, and he went before the HSCA in a closed executive session, and the transcript of this session was not available until the ARRB in the 90s. And in this deposition, this James Wilcott did, he mentioned that Dallas had many assets, companies sort of, doing exactly what the TSBD was doing. So it's very, very interesting, that Bill Weston would provide us, with all this framework confirming what this James Wilcott, who was in the CIA. And if you look up the name, you'll see that it's very, very possible that this.
Larry, you might want to make a closing remark about Carolyn Arnold, because you were observing how she seemed to be bona fidely concerned about her life, even in relation to her observations about Lee Oswald.
That's right.
Where he stepped out into the doorway to watch the motorcade as it passed by.
That's right. As we all know, Earl Goltz in 1978 wrote an article for the Dallas Morning News where he adjusted the time of Carolyn Arnold having seen Lee Oswald from 12:15 or earlier, that the Warren Commission wanted her sighting of Lee Oswald, to 12:25, where she saw him close to the glass doors of the entrance of the TSBD, which places him exactly where he was during the Auction 6 photograph. And not only that, very interesting what Bill Weston said, that Carolyn Arnold mentioned that there was a lot more going on in the TSBD company and the TSBD building that she really wanted to reveal. So I thought that was very.
Larry, I think that William Weston has led us very much in that direction. This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal, thanking my special guests, Larry Rivera and William Weston in particular, for a fascinating tour of the Texas School Book Depository building. So thank them for being here, and thank all of you for watching.